So if there's any 13-year-olds watching this right now that think you're going to be in a rock band, like maybe you will be, but
Hmm.
if you're not, you can still make a living as a musician. And it's pretty cool.
Welcome to the back of the band room. Tonight, I'm going to have the one and the only Jim Casella, who is a personal hero of mine. He was one of the arrangers for the Cavaliers. He arranged for Santa Clara Vanguard, and he worked very closely with Murray Gussig, who I just recently had on. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him in here, and he'll kick things off.
How you doing?
How's it going, man?
Thanks for your flexibility with my crazy week.
Well,
So
thanks for joining me. Like I said, no problem about being flexible. I'm on spring break. Thank you
that's
for
cool.
sitting down with me. I had such an awesome conversation with Murray. I knew I had to get you also. So, why did you pick drums?
Well, I started out as a kid. I think I started piano lessons around 7 years old, learned to read and could sound things out by ear and had a little bit of an aptitude for it, but it was still kind of a chore to have to practice. And, right around, I don't know, 3 or 4 years after that, I just really kind of caught the bug to want to transition over to drums and asked my parents, and they were really cool about it and got me one of those little Remo practice pads and a pair of sticks and signed me up with one of the local teachers at the local music shop and just started private lessons weekly and studied with that same teacher. I was, pretty soft spoken and wasn't going to win any popularity awards because I just wasn't, I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I still don't half the time.
Mhm.
But music gave me this thing where I could sort of feel like I belonged. And, when you're younger and going through school, sometimes, a lot of times, I think students are trying to figure that out. What is it they want to do? Where are they headed? And I mean, a lot of us, even as adults, still kind of grapple with that. But, you know, when you're in high school and middle school, it's like so much more fraught with wanting to fit in and that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure where I would have ended up going. I probably would have been like a theater kid or something like that.
Well,
Um,
I'm glad you didn't end up being a theater kid.
yeah, I think I am too. I actually did a lot of theater stuff, just playing in the pit. I ran the spotlight
Hmm.
at plays and stuff like that. So it's not really a far cry from being in the music program, I suppose.
So, what was your first band director like?
I don't think I know her first name, but she was Mrs. Denman to me.
Okay.
She was really accommodating and encouraging. I did the concert band there and the jazz band. So as I'm thinking back to it now, there was at least one band concert where in the jazz band, I had this big blowout drum solo that just, rocked the house, at which, I'm sure if I listened back to it now, I would cringe. But for what it was, people loved it. And she was totally encouraging of that. I'm sure that really played a part in fueling me to go into high school and try to be a hotshot freshman. It gave me confidence. That's hard to come by when you're, 13, 12, 13 years old. That's a tough time to feel good about yourself. And she gave that to me. That was actually pretty pivotal for me going into high school with something of a foundation. So I felt like I could hold my own against these older kids who
Hmm.
maybe had been there for a few years. And I got into high school. My band director there, his name was Bob Gomez. Went to Cupertino High School. He had been there for, gosh, over 20 years, probably 30 years or so by the time I was there. And back in his heyday, the band was huge and they did the Rose Parade and pretty ambitious. And I think by the time I got there, the program had shrunk a lot more. Silicon Valley was becoming the Silicon Valley that we all know today. Yeah, like I was talking about with my drum teacher Curtis, he maybe by the time I was a junior, we sort of corralled him into coming in to kind of help just kind of as a part-timer. But most of the time he was a one-man show there, as most band directors are. It's a
Hmm.
hard gig.
I used to think I wanted to be a band director, and I moved to Orlando and got a job teaching at a music store. And the owner says, "Why don't you ride along with our road rep? He's going to let you meet all the band directors. You can give out your card, shake some hands." And I met every band director in like two different counties, and they just look so tired. And I said, "Well,
tracks.
I I don't know actually if I want to do this.
It takes a special, a special someone to
Hmm.
buckle down and do that because it's hard. Like, even when you compare that the teacher, the band teacher compared to, somebody who teaches math or
Oh
science,
yeah.
not that those aren't challenging subjects to teach in their own way, I'm sure. I think sometimes the arts get a little bit of a bad rap because they aren't thought of as a standard subject like math and English and science.
Hmm.
But all of those skills that you learn in an English class or a math class, like those all come to bear when you're trying to interpret music or trying to learn an instrument or trying to communicate through a medium other than language, words, and even just understanding how rhythms work and the harmonic series. It's all very mathematical. I think music doesn't get the appreciation it deserves from kind of the more
Yeah,
mainstream subjects, but
for
I'm
sure.
probably
You
preaching
would
to the
hope.
choir on that.
Oh, so, or I'm sorry, how early in the day do you think about drums?
Oh, it's pretty much nonstop. It's part of almost everything that I do at this point because with Tapspace, which is really my day gig, it's beyond full time at this point. We're always working on new music and editing new music, trying to sometimes, we'll be working on a piece and it might not be entirely clear what the composer intended. So we're trying to interpret that and or playing through things to make sure it fits in the hands.
You guys play through the music that uh arranged something?
Not that often, but it does happen. Yeah. If something seems like on paper, if it looks hard or it doesn't seem super playable, sometimes if you just pick up some mallets or some sticks and just kind of go through and it's like, oh, okay, right. That does kind of work. Sometimes what's on the page doesn't always translate to kinesthetic motion in your hands. But yeah, we've come close to turning pieces down where it didn't seem doable. And then we play through it. It's like, actually, that makes a lot of sense and it's pretty cool. So yeah, it does help to actually play through stuff, which is something we say a lot to people who are submitting music to us from time to time. Like, have you workshopped this with an ensemble or has a human played this?
Yeah, this is actually kind of hitting on another question I had. Do you tend to write in a playing it first kind of way? Or I'm sure at some point you know your cliches and you know what will work and what might be a stretch. But I find when I'm writing at the computer, I'm like, this is going to be great. And then I press play and it's awful. Is that something you've run into?
So many things. Because when you are writing, you're wearing so many hats. Like you said, part of your brain is trying to make this look good. So it's readable, legible, and that's great because a lot of people actually don't do that. There's some pretty terrible looking notation out there. I've seen a lot of it. I think that's great. But I treat that more like step 3 or 4, because if I'm trying to come up with ideas, usually I'm going to just try to barf it out anyway I possibly can. Good ideas, to me anyways, they're really easy to lose. They're very ephemeral and they just
Mhm.
pop in your head and then my attention wanders very quickly. I'll lose that idea really quickly if I don't write it down. Yeah, getting the notes down. Ideally, I never used to write sticking in my music, which I find kind of staggering in hindsight, especially with rudimental writing. It's such a
Mhm.
part of the playing that stuff all needs to be defined. Yeah, that would be probably like the second phase of getting it in there and maybe cleaning up beam placements and stuff like that. Once I've gleaned that what I was playing and what I'm hearing and feeling in my hands translates to what is on screen. If I play it back, if it sounds similar to what I was playing on the pad, then I know I'm in the right ballpark. Granted, you do that enough and you write enough for long enough, you do have, like you said, kind of your bag of tricks that you can lean on. And I've certainly done that plenty, but you can start writing more from an intellectual standpoint than a emotional standpoint. And I'd say more often than not, that doesn't always work as well. Like it doesn't feel as good. And
Mhm.
a lot of times what ends up might have seemed like an interesting idea when you put it on paper, but when you give it to people to play
Mhm.
and hear it in context, it's like it either doesn't work in the hands or it doesn't speak musically. And I don't know, I think especially in marching percussion, we're all pretty guilty of that at various times. Some of it is just sort of built into the nature of competition and like write the hardest stuff you possibly can because it's
Mhm.
impressive when people can actually do it. But I don't know. And maybe I'm getting older and crankier or something, but like when I hear something like that that doesn't make me feel something, it's like impressive from a physical feat of accomplishment. But if it doesn't seem like it's serving the music or it doesn't generate some sort of an emotional response from me, then I feel like I lose interest in it. So to me, the Goldilocks goal is to, have that hard stuff in there, but also make it feel good phrasing wise so that whether or not you're a drummer who understands how hard it is to play backwards flam this or
Mhm.
that, it's like it still feels good to them and they can be like, wow, that was awesome. That to me is the goal, hopefully.
Mhm. And I don't know, for me, it's just been really hard to like ride that line because when I'm writing it on the computer, it it's very easy to look at two, let's take two quarter notes and say, yeah, that's lame. But on a field with 20 people playing two quarter notes, it's really big. It's so powerful. But it's
Yeah,
hard to feel that, when you're just in your office.
totally. Yeah, and that's, what a lot of people don't realize is that specific thing is actually really, really hard to do well. Like there's so much space between those quarter notes that the chances that the players are going to play them like perfectly,
I was also kind of curious, have you ever written something that you couldn't play? And how do you make
I,
that work?
most of it actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think most of the stuff I've written for drum corps and stuff, I might play through phrase by phrase or bar by bar as I'm writing it, but I'm admittedly just not the player that these players are. So, ask me to play through the opener for any of those years, and there's not a fighting chance I could do it, let alone doing it on, say, tenors where I'm going around the drums or some of the crazy mallet parts. Yeah, I'm fully guilty of being the guy that's sort of like do as I say, not as I do as a writer. In fairness, I have enough background in I think most of these instruments, there's definitely areas where I'm pretty deficient, like hand drumming and steel pan or stuff like that, where I've
Sure.
just barely scratched the surface on what you can do. But I, played mallets all through college and done a lot of drum set, played tenors in marching band. I played snare in marching band. I played bass drum when I marched drum corps. So I feel pretty knowledgeable about the instruments and what they can and can't do. And, I might start to push it a little bit in terms of trying to squeeze a little a sticking in or a little phrase here and there. And that's where working with, like-minded people who are good at what they do and can also, like Murray, for example, when we work together, he's a great drummer for starters, but he's also a really great teacher and he's just got a really in-depth insight about all kinds of music. And a lot of my writing was informed by stuff he's written too. Like I've been very influenced by his writing all the way back to when we marched together. And so, you know, by sheer luck in some ways, the things that I was writing that maybe didn't quite translate or didn't quite fit or didn't quite complete the phrase or didn't quite transition from one figure into the next. He has always had a really uncanny knack to kind of like know what I meant. And then he can kind of like go, okay, well, let's just do this instead. And he can just kind of get in there and fiddle with it. And it sounds way better. I think we kind of do that for each other. We have a lot of similar tastes, but we're also pretty different in a lot of ways too. And, I think we've been able to leverage that for each other. Our backgrounds are slightly different and we do have different opinions and feelings about a lot of stuff. We butted heads about it here and there, but at the end of the day, I think we'll still trust each other enough to get out of each other's way if need be, and
Mm.
ultimately end up with a thing at the end of that that is better for it. And if he's bringing his A game and I'm bringing my A game, like there's a good chance that should work out really well. Similarly, like with the front ensemble stuff, things I would write would oftentimes just need to get massaged by Jim Ancona. When I was at Cavaliers, like Alan Miller would do adjusting. And, if I were the kind of writer who just basically said, my notes are set in stone and you must do
Mhm.
this, it wouldn't work. And it wouldn't sound as good as it ultimately did because it ends up being a collaborative process where people bring their strengths to the party and just ultimately end up making the whole thing sound better.
Hmm.
So, there's this part of me that's like, oh man, I wish I was better so that I couldn't, we didn't have to change as much. But, that's just a natural part of the writing process, regardless of whether you're writing music or poetry or, anything. Revisions are always necessary. And if you're just doing all your editing in an echo chamber in a bubble of your own head, I don't think you're going to go as far as if you can bounce ideas off of other people with different influences and different experience. And so, yeah, I've been really lucky to be around some really talented people who've ultimately made my stuff sound way better than it would have if it was just only me.
Well, it seems like one of your strengths is like the use of ostinato without things sounding boring. Where and how do you find the balance between repeating and deviating?
I don't know. I think I will always gravitate to music that feels good and feels like it's going somewhere. And
Hmm.
we've probably all heard music or experimental performances where it kind of doesn't do that. It starts to get kind of boring, or it doesn't seem like it's serving the audience. It's just sort of serving the artist. And,
Hmm.
maybe there's nothing wrong with that, but I've seen enough of that where I lose interest and I never want to do that
Hmm.
to anybody. And granted, the mediums I'm writing in are never, there's usually not time to do that anyways, because it's either a limited time for a band show or a percussion ensemble piece or a film cue or something like that. And it's just very, you know, contained. But there is something to be said for like repetition can give familiarity. Once you kind of catch onto a groove, like letting it be without having to change it every 4 bars it can be hard to do when you're trying to be creative and you're writing. Like you're always trying to throw all these ideas in, but the more you do that, the more it kind of breaks the flow of things. And this isn't a hard rule or anything like that, but I think there's something to be said for establishing a theme or a groove or something like that that can exist over a span of time. So hopefully the players and the listener can go on a journey with it and evolve over time. And if it's literally an ostinato that doesn't change, then that will get boring probably pretty quickly, especially these days. It's like our attention spans are just ever shrinking.
Hmm.
My go-to with something like that is to just layer something new on top, and it makes that ostinato suddenly sound different. It's like you started with blue and then you added red, and so now you have
Yeah.
purple, and then now we're going to add a little splash of yellow, and it's like all these colors will kind of make it interesting, even if that ostinato has been existing the entire. So playing with color is a key component to making music evolve and sound interesting and progress over time.
Yeah. I just always love that your stuff, like you said, it feels like it's going somewhere, but it's not really in a hurry to get there some of the time. And it's just this kind of
Sometimes.
under the surface, like boiling tension until it's, not. But there's always something hypnotic about it. By the way, what is a scuttlebutt?
Wow, I should know this, and I don't think I could answer that for you right now.
Totally.
And it's written for younger kids, and it's like, this is going to be called Scuttlebutt because it's fun to say.
Scuttlebutt.
It has the word butt in it. Yeah, you can't go wrong. I did look that up though. I think it has something to do with like a sailor term or something like that. But no, I don't know. I should know that.
So, Murray was talking about how Martian Mambo was built on Mitchell Peters' study. So I was wondering, you studied with Anthony Cerrone.
Hmm.
So I was wondering if there's anything that he taught you that ended up somewhere in some show or street beat or anything like that.
Not as clearly, I think, as the Mitchell Peters Martian Mambo example.
Hmm.
The thing with Tony is that he was a really musical snare drummer.
Yeah.
He's famous for Portraits in Rhythm, as a lot of percussionists know. And, when he would demonstrate those etudes when I was studying with him, it was clear as day that he's making so much music on a snare drum that directly influenced the way I wrote. And He also taught Fred Sanford. He taught all kinds of Vanguard guys, Kurt Moore, Alan Christensen, and even Ralph's teacher, Chuck Dowd, the funky primer guy.
Mhm.
He was Tony's student, and Ralph came through a similar program. It's all very concert minded, like making music with percussion. And, you know, kind of by mistake, I think, well, not by mistake, but like Vanguard has stood for that for well before I ever even knew what it was.
Mhm.
And I lucked into being, I grew up right around the corner from where it was, and I ended up marching there and being a part of that kind of lineage. In a lot of ways, it all kind of points back to Tony and those kind of just musical concepts that percussion is just not. It's not just drumming. It's not as simplistic as that. It's a very crafted art form, and we also have to do it on hundreds of different types of instruments too. So I think that it's not a direct thing that came up in one particular piece of music, but it's more of a value set that percussion isn't just about drumming, it's about making music. And
Yeah.
that's very much what Tony stood for, and he really fueled a lot of that in me. Something more literal that he probably gave to me that I've just stolen from him was there was like a little multi-percussion setup that had like a finger cymbal and a cowbell and a triangle and maybe a cymbal or something like that. And just all these little things are being played with triangle beaters. I've definitely used those types of combinations of little multi setups more than once, more than twice, probably more than
Mhm.
5 times.
If you were at Festivus dinner with Murray, what grievances would you air?
Oh man. I don't know who got to pick the menu for dinner that night. We tend to butt heads on food. We were in a meeting the other day. I was holding these up. Salt and vinegar, blue diamond almonds.
More of a wasabi guy myself.
The wasabi, yes, soy wasabi, those are great too, but they're like, you say salt and vinegar and I'm in. I'm good. You say that to Murray, he's gonna run the other way.
All right, so who's on your Mount Rushmore for drummers?
Steve Gadd, Brian Blade.
Oh my gosh. Brian, I don't know how he does it, but he never repeats himself.
He's just sort of a force of nature. He channels something else when he's playing that, yeah. It's like every time I see him, it's a transformative experience.
What about in the marching or orchestral world?
Hmm. Well, Ralph Hardiman was always, my hero as far as like an arranger goes. He's the one that made me want to do all this in the first place, just hearing what he could do with a marching ensemble. So hands down, he was always the guy I looked up to. All those years that we were doing Vanguard, me and Murray, and I don't know, 10 some odd years or so, like Ralph was always kind of on the team. He'd come in here and there for a few days at a time throughout the year. And, just by him showing up in front of the line, they immediately started playing better.
Yeah.
They would sort of bring morale around and raise spirits, and his presence, aside from being a great musician and a great teacher and just super encouraging and supportive, like he's the kind of guy that just has his energy. Yeah, he's definitely up there. And so having been able to work with him, where I'm writing and he's coming in and helping, it's like that's sort of a weird turn of events where it's sort of like, how did I get here? I've always really admired Tom Hannum's writing quite a bit. I don't know Tom that well. I mean, we've met and see each other here and there, but I think a lot of the people that I've worked with have crossed, they've either been part of his programs or have kind of ties there that I feel sort of like a second cousin to that
It's
school a little
fraternal.
bit. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. People used to call styles like East Coast and West Coast and stuff like that. And I never really understood that. Like, you know, you can look at Ralph Hardiman's writing and look at Tom Float's writing, and both those guys are West Coast guys, but like their writing sounds nothing like each other. That's one of the reasons that was such a great sort of golden era of drum corps, I think, because there was like everybody sort of sounded different to some degree anyway. Like there was the Velvet Knights and the Freelancers. These are all like West Coast chords that all had their own personalities and they all sounded different. And I don't know, I think it does. There's everything that's going on now is it's amazing. Like the level that people are writing at and what the players can do is it's dumbfounding to me. Like I don't think I know what to do in today's climate, but there is I think around the time I was getting out of it, I was starting to feel almost like we were having to program things in such a way that you had a good chance of earning the best score possible because that's how the sheets read or that's what the competition expects. It's almost like a compulsory sort of way of writing. And I don't know. Sometimes I'd find myself guilty of doing that, just sort of playing to what I think people want. And then usually I think when I find myself doing that, it doesn't feel right. And those are the times where I feel like maybe if it was just a phrase or just a chart that I was writing, it might like those are the things that don't feel like they have lasting qualities. They served their purpose for whatever it was, but they didn't, they weren't bringing anything new to the party. And I
Hmm.
think that would be my greatest wish for, for like where the activity is going is to like, encourage as much originality and as much sort of going off the deep end as possible to bring new ideas and new forces into play so that we're not so worried about challenging adjudicators or challenging audiences in such a way that everything's sort of played safe and kind of self-contained in these boxes.
So I think I heard you're working with the Mandarins this upcoming summer in some capacity. Is that true?
Yeah, I was working with is maybe putting it more so than what I'm actually doing is, just spending a few days and popping in and offering some insight and some cheerleading and consulting and yeah, just basically being a fresh set of eyes and ears. I did that last year with them as well, and it was first time I've dipped my toes back in the drum corps waters since I left in 2009. And man, those
What a
guys are
great
great.
group. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so fun because I mean, more than anything, it's like the players were so cool, so talented, so game for anything. They were young and fired up and fresh. Like it was, they didn't have a lot of returning people, so it was a really, there's a lot of work to do. But beyond that, like the staff is so, I'm at an age now where it's like, oh, well, like their whole staff is like a completely different generation than me.
Hmm.
And they're so good. Like the information that they give is so good. I guess I was just thinking back to the time when I was their age and teaching drum corps and just how kind of clueless I was about so many things. But it gave me a lot of hope. Like
Hmm.
things are in really good hands and just the kind of the positive nature of the whole environment was really cool to be around. And, I'm there as sort of this guy from another era that, people know for one reason or another. But like at the end of the day, it's like my being there didn't really make them any better necessarily. They've got everything they need right there. And if anything, I'm just kind of coming to tag along and just be a part of the fun. And it's also like the J.W. Kester, the director there, was the guy that hired me at Vanguard in 1996. He was the cadet corps director at Vanguard when he hired me to do that in 1992. So like we go way back then. And then here he is, the director of the corps, and I'm coming in and working for him again. And Murray's going to spend a few days there with him too. And it's Glenn Crosby, who taught us at Vanguard all those years and worked with us when we were teaching at Vanguard. He's spending some time with them. J-Dub is like running that corps in a lot of ways. You talk about me and Murray and Glenn, like we're just coming in for a few days here and there and lending a hand where we can.
Signing autographs.
Right. Taking selfies. Yeah, really, that's the team there is rock solid and they've got really good energy, really good momentum, and it's cool to be a part of.
I think their show they did last year is one of the more memorable ones for me.
Me
It's
too.
very easy to rewatch.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. Even just those days where you're kind of out there, 8 or 9 hours a day doing rehearsals and stuff, and you're kind of hearing the same phrases over and over again. after a while, kind of like what we were talking about with like playing theater gigs, it's like you start to wonder if it's going to get old, but like, I don't know. It was pretty fun. And it's, like when I was there, it was still pretty early in the season too. So every rep is kind of a new adventure, whether or not
Hmm.
it's going to, land the way they intended it to. But that's part of the game.
So going back, what were a few things that were like similar to when you were teaching versus today's teachers, and what things were different?
Well, on one hand, I think the shows have changed so much now that I think when I went in, I was a little nervous going in last year because I'd been out of it for so long. I kind of have it in my mind that everything's different and has changed. And that's actually not true. It's all very much very similar. But I think what is different is that it seems like the people teaching now have a little more professional background as teachers, at least the people I was around. Whereas I think when I was teaching, we would basically age out of drum corps. And if you were lucky, you'd get picked up to go teach drum corps the year after you age out. You may not have had any real teaching experience at that point. You just happen to sort of be indoctrinated into this club because you marched there, whether or not it's the group you marched with, but like you have this drum corps experience. So suddenly that makes you qualified to teach drum corps. That's the way it used to be. And it's like,
Hmm.
man, some of the stupid things I would say, or, just to try to assert some sort of authority or something like that. It was dumb, like
Hmm.
it wasn't an educational way of being. Something dumb I said, or something where it wasn't really about teaching. It was more just about this sort of atmosphere of instructors versus students. And back then, they probably wouldn't even call them students, they'd call them members. Now it just feels more educational to me. It feels more respectful and professional. And at least that was my takeaway. When I started marching, you messed up, you take your drum off and you're doing push ups. It was sort of
Hmm.
militaristic, and you're going to get punished for doing something wrong.
Hmm.
And, it's not like there's not sometimes cases for some discipline or something, but like that seems like it's defeating the purpose if you're spending valuable rehearsal time by making somebody run a lap because they missed their step or something. It's like, what good did that serve? Those are the types of things that used to happen a lot, I think, when I was marching and when I was teaching too. And they seem a little power trippy in
Hmm.
hindsight, or at least speaking for myself. I didn't want to come off like I didn't know what I was doing when really a lot of times I didn't know what I was doing and I was just
Well,
trying my
when
best.
you've just aged out, I mean, the age gap there, it gets you. It's for me. It's been a lot easier to be myself the older I get because there's more separation between me and the kids.
For
I
sure.
teach middle schoolers and high schoolers, so like my first year out of high school, I was their age. I'm sure exactly what happened when you were teaching at Santa Clara, right? It's so much
Yeah.
harder to. It's very easy to make someone who's 20 years younger than you respect you, or it's easier.
I just always assume they'd think I'm a big dork.
Hey, big dorks are in right now, Jim.
I'll take that then.
Do you know about the Drum Corps Coffee Shop?
I've seen that, I think.
Yeah, it's a podcast, but there's a Facebook group as well. And I posted when I interviewed Murray about, hey guys, ask me your questions.
Oh.
And they gave me a lot of great like troll questions. So we got to do a segment of troll questions. They took it a little more seriously for you. So if we let's get into some of those. Some of them are pretty fun. So Carl Epler says, does he have a favorite book he wrote from the Santa Clara Vanguard years, and why might it be 2000?
Hey, Carl. Yeah, Carl marched, I think 99 was his first year. Boy, that's tough because they're all sort of unique in their own ways, but 2000 was pretty awesome because we were sort of just going for it. 2003 was another year we were just kind of going for it, and I think those years tend to stick out to me. There are times when, we didn't maybe quite make it all the way just because shows were really hard, but I think we were taking risks, and I think that stands out to me and it does end up being more fun. 97 was also one of my favorites just because that was sort of where started feeling like I started getting it. I
Hmm.
started, like whatever my voice was becoming, like it was really starting to take hold at that point. And I think we were starting to see the results of that. So it was like, oh, This is fun.
It's trying to shape up.
Yeah.
Cool. Wesley Sullivan says, and by the way, not to speak on your behalf, but I have a kind of a comment to say to this. Wesley Sullivan says, Jim, come back. The percussion world needs you. And I want to say the percussion world has you.
Yeah.
People act like you're the avatar and you just vanished. If they would look at things a little more globally than drum corps, they would see you're still doing probably more.
Uh,
Like what I'm stoked on is my students can now play Jim Casella music. More people are playing your music since you've moved on.
isn't that funny? Yeah. Like
Uh-huh.
with Tapspace, we go and do all these trade shows, and inevitably some younger student will come up and be like, "Hey, can I get a selfie or something?" And I figured like maybe they're in the marching band or they used my drumsticks or something like that. And they're like,
Which
"We
are
played
great, by the
technology
way.
last year and it's so
Yeah.
fun." Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah. It's like they probably don't even know I'm from this marching world, and there's this other stuff with the concert stuff. So yeah, I am fully immersed in the percussion world more than I've ever been, just with all the publishing. And granted, I'm working a lot more on other people's music than my own music, so sometimes that's a bit of a struggle, because I don't have a lot of time to write these days. But
Now, do you
yeah.
mean like you're arranging for marching bands or you do film scoring stuff as well?
Well, I've dabbled a little in that, but I never really went full force at that. I did some commercial stuff and a little bit of film music, and always sort of dreamed of doing that. But it's like you got to work really hard to get good at that,
Hmm.
and love the idea of that. But in practicality, I can't really say that's what I do. So I've dabbled in that, and I've, you know, dabbled in commercial stuff. But yeah, at this point, Tapspace kind of rules my life because it's grown quite a bit over the years. And we have a team of people now, and it's more than just me and Murray, like when we first
Hmm.
started out. So
I
feels
think
like more responsibility.
I think he might have told me you guys just hit over 800 pieces on the website.
Is that right?
Something crazy like that.
Yeah. We were just dealing with a bunch of website issues these past several days. And
Mm.
we were kind of like thinking like, gosh, do we need to revamp the whole website? And like, what would that mean in terms of how many products we'd have to re-upload to a new website? It was just kind of dumbfounding to imagine what that amount of work was going to entail.
Hmm.
So,
Wow. So,
so
what is the process like? If there were a composer that wanted to submit to you guys, what does that process look like?
it's pretty straightforward. There's a form on the Tapspace website, and you just fill it out with all your details. And we usually ask for just a PDF of the score, ideally a live recording. If you don't have a live recording, I guess the second best would be like a really good mock-up, like a sampled mock-up or something like that. And then just a little patience. We get a fair amount of submissions, so it takes us a while to look at them all. But there's just so much cool stuff being written
Hmm.
these days that it's like we're in this cool little gold rush of new music. And percussion is just such a new art form when you compare it to something that's been around longer, like piano, violin, things like that. So,
But then it's so old.
well, true.
The
Just in,
learned percussionist is a new phenomenon.
yeah, it feels like it's in our sort of mainstream, sort of Western mindset of music education. Like it's a newer art form, and like more and more schools have percussion ensembles than they've ever had. And so people are just writing a lot of cool new music and creating new cool instruments and thinking of all kinds of crazy things you can do with percussion. And so as we've grown and the percussion world has grown, we get a lot more stuff, and it's easy to get a little overwhelmed by it sometimes, but we just get so much cool stuff that
Yeah.
if we were haphazardly kind of going through it, we'd probably miss out on a lot of this stuff. So we want to make sure that we're checking it all out and actually giving it its fair due so that, we don't gloss over something. Because funny story with that, like when we actually started Tapspace because Murray had sent, I think, Martian Mambo and Electric Wheelchair to Roloff, who is another publishing company. And they're actually good friends of ours now at this point, all these years later. But I think either they didn't get back to him, or yeah, maybe they didn't get back to him in the time that
Thank
he wanted
God.
to.
Thank God they
I
didn't.
know, because in a way, like he had those things. I had, a few years worth of Vanguard shows that people used to email me about, like, hey, can I get the snare part for the '97 opener or whatever? And so like we just decided to throw these things in some products and figure out how to make a website and start putting it out in the world. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that for somebody else. Like if there's a really great talent out there who's making great music, like we'd love to be involved with it.
Lest they start another percussion company and piss roll off and you off.
You're right.
All right, so there's a few more of these fan questions. Paul Renton says, does he consider cereal a soup?
Cereal or soup? No.
Hard no. Perfect. How would Matt Brown says, how would you define your voice as a composer, arranger?
Oh, I don't know.
That one seems hard to me.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you listen to stuff I've written, there's some familiarity from piece to piece, but I like to try to approach things from a standpoint of, everything I write has some sort of an original idea or thought behind it, so it doesn't all start to sound the same. You look at Stormbreak and Scuttlebutt and Technology; those are all kind of supposed to sound similar because they've got similar instrumentation, and uh, you know, but they're different melodies and different ideas throughout. And they progress and get more advanced the more they've progressed over the years. But yeah, I would like to just say I'm curious as a musician, and so I like to try things, and they don't always work out, but hopefully when you're hearing something I've written, there's a sense that it's new and exploratory and creative and bold and maybe makes you feel something.
Mhm.
That's my hope anyways.
Oh, it certainly does. Absolutely. Jeff Platt asks, if you could switch spaces with any percussion instructor from the past, alive or dead, how would you do that?
Hi, Jeff. We marched together as well.
Yeah, maybe the Tom
Yeah,
Turner from
I'm
Karen
not
Power.
smart enough to make that happen.
All right. Daniel, perhaps Danielle? Danielle Jet says, where's the Fountain of Youth?
Oh, Dan Jett. Yeah, he goes way back with the old
Sure.
SCV crew as well.
Well, I
My
said it
back
must
is
have been in Portland.
my back is barking.
Is that where you keep all the aging? It's in the back.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. All right. So, let's see. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Hmm. Happy? Yeah, I don't know.
Are you happy now?
Sometimes, sometimes not. Kind of depends on the day. I think there's something to be said for always trying to learn and grow, and I try to embody that. I sometimes to my own demise, I don't always feel satisfied with where I'm at, or Murray and I pontificate this all the time, where we both tend to be kind of detail freaky, perfectionistic. And, while that does sometimes help the quality in your work, it doesn't always make for happiness. Like sometimes knowing when to just sort of leave well enough alone and call it good and move on to the next thing and just take a break. For me, that's really hard. I work a lot and I'm always kind of striving, and I wish I had more time to write. I wish I had more time to be physically active and do more things. And the older you get, the less it feels like you have time to do all those things. And so finding a way to balance all of that is an ongoing challenge. And I think, you know, at some point you make peace with it. Other times you challenge yourself and you try to reinvent. And I don't know. I think I don't like getting into such a routine that life gets boring. So like
Mm-hmm.
one of the cool things about Tapspace is very routine because we have kind of a process that we go through when we're publishing music and stuff, but every piece is different. You're always dealing with different voices from a composer standpoint. Sometimes we're creating audio for these pieces, and so that requires recording or sequencing using stuff like virtual drumline or other sample libraries. And like that's a whole art form all its own, which is like at that point I don't feel like a publisher. I feel more like a sound engineer or a recording person. I love being able to put one hat down for a while and go wear that other hat because it keeps it fresh for me. If I was just showing up to an office every day and selling insurance or something, I think I would just be miserable. So
Absolutely. Was.
I'm really grateful for the fact that music offers all of this stuff, even though I don't really play at all anymore. I still have all kinds of outlets to exercise my background and experience
Hmm.
in a way that I think kind of serves our community and is gratifying for me. And I feel really lucky for that.
Yeah, you seem in a pretty special place. We were talking about being in a famous rock band. That's what you think you're going to do.
Right.
But then you find out just how many ways there are to make a living at music. I don't know anybody that does it the same way.
Totally.
It just all looks so different for every single full timer that I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can be just a teacher, you can be just a composer, just a publisher,
Instrument
just a player.
repair.
You can be in the industry designing things.
Bill Bachman's making drums now.
I know, man. Talk about a renaissance, man.
Oh my God.
I love that. And, for a lot of us, we end up kind of dabbling in a lot of those different things. Had I gone into law or something, I'd probably be making more money than I do right now. But
Mhm.
I don't know. That's not me. And you can actually earn a living as a musician, lo and behold, whether you teach band or you arrange drumline music, like you can earn a living as a musician. So if there's any 13-year-olds watching this right now that think you're going to be in a rock band, like maybe you will be, but
Mhm.
if you're not, you can still make a living as a musician. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's such a cool job that 9 out of 10 days it doesn't really feel like a job at all. Most of what I do is I teach at schools and I gig and stuff. But it's so funny, like right before a break comes up, or if it's Friday, the people in the front office are always like, "Oh, thank God it's Friday," and I'm like, "Is it?" Is- You know what I
I've
mean? I
always
only
been
know
that
it's
way too.
Friday. I only know it's Friday because this is the school I'm at on Fridays. Besides that, it doesn't like I'm not celebrating my week. First of all, I'm going to work tomorrow too. You
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I sort of notoriously don't care about holidays. Weekends, I don't really care because it's like, if I had my way, I'd probably work every day of the week because I enjoy working. Granted, I have tendencies where I can probably burn out if left to my own devices. So it's good to take a break every once in a while. But yeah, the week, thank God it's Friday thing and pray for the weekend and looking forward to spring break. It's like, well, yeah, okay, that's fine. But like
yeah.
I'm just happy doing what I'm doing.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing some classic spring break stuff, but I'm also trying to write some ensemble pieces, and I'm trying to write the audition packet for my high school kids. I don't have to be writing percussion ensemble stuff, but it's so fun, Like I tell my girlfriend, okay, I'm gonna go do some business, and then I'm in there like having the time of my life. Yeah,
He's like, you're
it's,
just playing around in there.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
I'm
it's work.
like, is it cool if I go practice? She's like, yeah, you have to, don't you? And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess so. It just seems like I'm having fun and you're on the couch, you know.
Yeah. It's helpful to kind of realize not everybody gets to do this kind of work where it's gratifying and you find purpose and meaning in it. It's not necessarily normal.
Very few people get to.
And so I don't know. I have to remind myself sometimes it's, we're lucky to
Hmm.
be able to do this and kind of carve our own path because it's probably rarer than we might realize because we're sort of in our own world and doing all our stuff and busy all the time.
Right, right. I have the receipt of my first drum set, and every once in a while, I'll give it a kiss. I'll thank it.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Your symbol writing is always like kind of stuck out to me. So, do you have any tips that could improve somebody's symbol writing?
Probably the best advice I could give is to just listen to a lot of music. Well, just listen in general. Like maybe listen to the cymbal player who says, I can't hold these up for the entire show. Like you're going to
Yeah,
have to give
yeah.
them a break every once in a while. Or, if there's a cymbal instructor who specializes in this instrument, use that person as much as you possibly can because they're going to know things that you probably don't if you haven't played the instrument extensively, at least in that genre. Like marching cymbals is a very specialized genre of cymbal playing. Um, but that aside, I'd say get yourself a pair of cymbals and learn how to make them sound great. Because every pair of cymbals is different. Even if you know, put one in the other hand, it's going to feel different. Like it's a very personalized instrument, and when you know you can trust yourself to play a good cymbal crash pretty reliably, you will immediately have more respect for that instrument. Because I think, it's not uncommon for a cymbal player to kind of be the butt of the joke, or, you
Yeah.
know, they'll show the little monkey clapping toy, and it's a kind of a cliche when it comes to cymbal playing, but it's a very difficult instrument to play. Anybody can hit two plates together, but to make those sound good is extremely difficult. So developing an aptitude and an ear for that, I think, is really important. And you have to know what a good cymbal crash sounds like in order to find that. Find somebody in the orchestra who knows what they're doing and like take a lesson. Get some good recordings of you know good cymbal literature. And I know that sounds nerdy, but like it's actually really important to make cymbals sound good. And that's square one before you get into all the split taps and dings and all the stuff that you can do. So yeah, knowing what the instrument sounds like and treating it with respect, I think is definitely priority number one. If you know how to write split parts, say like for bass drums, like marching bass drums, those are like melodic. You can treat cymbals very similarly. They might not be as tonal or pitch based, but you can approach them similarly. If you're playing faster rhythms where maybe one player, or if you're playing in unison, you can't articulate all those sounds reliably because the frequency in which you're doing those is just too fast. Experiment with splitting that up. If you've got four players, you can have players 1 and 3 play one part and players 2 and 4 play the other part, and rotate that way. So they're playing half as fast as what they would if they were playing in unison. Getting creative about those types of split things and the time it takes to play a crash choke and then properly prepare to play whatever you're going to play afterwards. Like understanding how long it takes to be ready to play that next tap or that next crash or that next little hi-hat choke or something. I think any percussion writing kind of ends up calling for this. If you're writing a mallet part and then suddenly you have to go to congos or something like that, there has to be time to put the mallets down so that you can go move to the new instrument and then play with your hands. You might only need a bar, but you need to allow time for the player to do that. Similarly with cymbals, you have to allow time for them to let the choke, and so the cymbals, aren't ringing, and then they have to remove the cymbals from their body and then get them to where they need to be next. So might sound silly, but similar to like playing through your snare parts on a practice pad, play through the cymbal parts and see if you can actually do it. Because
Hmm.
I think, especially for like a young writer, I can imagine myself doing this. Like you get ambitious and you try to write more than is physically possible, and suddenly it's just not going to be doable, and you're going to just end up rewriting it. So having a game plan when you're writing that stuff is helpful, and it will make everybody's lives easier if you've thought that through as the writer, and not just write a series of eighth notes or 16th notes and say, see the cymbal instructor on what to do, because that's just basically passing the buck, and that's not really writing to
Mm.
me. So I guess I feel pretty strongly about taking that instrument seriously, because it's a lot of groups don't even have cymbal lines anymore, which I
Yeah.
understand for practical reasons. But for the ones that do, I think it's important to do it well, because yeah, I don't want to see more cymbal lines go by the wayside, because it adds
It's a really
so
cool
much
art.
more to the
Hmm.
it. When I went from Santa Clara over to Cavaliers, they didn't have a cymbal
Yeah.
lines.
You missed it.
Now, spindle, oh, totally. I mean, and it's fine. I wasn't like, I didn't have a beef with it or anything like that, because I was sort of adapting to a new environment, and it was a new challenge actually for me to kind of change the way I did things. But when you're just with the battery and like running through the show music and stuff, like before a show, it just sounds so dry, without
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it's
The cymbals to me, they let the drum line be legato when you want it to be.
yeah, I mean, there's so much more color that comes
Mhm.
out when there's all that extra sound. And sure, you can kind of make that up with the front ensemble, but
Yeah.
that's different.
A
I
mountain
didn't,
hitting a suspended cymbal is just not the same impact, man.
it's not. And, if they're relegated to just doing that, then you can't have interplay between the crash cymbals in the fields and, maybe a swell in the front ensemble that leads into that crash. I mean, that sounds simple and like maybe what's the big deal, but I don't know. There's like losing an entire color. You have to be much more creative with how you're going about cymbal writing when it's just in the front ensemble. And they can do hand crashes in the front ensemble, but that's like you are putting the mallets down for an extended period and you're grabbing the plates because this is a big impact moment. And that's what you're going to do for this next phrase or two. Whereas if you have a cymbal line, I think, that's not necessarily always going to be the case.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of cymbal lines.
Yeah, likewise. I've been begging the band directors I work with to just give me one. We don't need this many mallet players. Just give me two kids. Just two would be
Yeah.
lovely. And then the thing that is annoying is what happens every year is kids forget about band camp or they show up a month in and, well, let's just dump them on a rack. And it's like, well, I already wrote the rack part.
Yeah, like
It,
that's not just sort of this
it's not a
extra
holding
thing.
station. Yeah,
Like
right,
that's a pretty intricate part to just have somebody go in and
right.
double or something.
I have one more for you.
Sure.
So this is the traditional question at the back of the band room. What is some trouble that you got into in the back room?
Hmm. Hmm. Oh man. Should I share this or not?
The intriguist.
Yeah, well, this is not something to be proud of. I think it was when I was in middle school. So it's a long time ago. But yeah, I think there's a little tradition of the percussionists in the back to kind of coat the walls with their boogers. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know who got to eventually clean that up, but yeah, quite the collection there after a while.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, so
It's all right. No judgment.
yeah, that's a little embarrassing, but what can I say? We were kids and didn't know any better, and
And you
all
were
the more
playing too many
reason to keep the
ballads.
percussionists engaged so that they're not wiping boogers on the wall.
That's right. That's why we do percussion all the time.
That is the takeaway of the day.
If you want clean walls, head to Tapspace, buy a couple pieces, and those walls will be sparkly.
Hmm.
But all right, Jim. Man, I really appreciate you sitting down with me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, let me know if you're ever down in Florida. I'll show you where all the good noodle places are or whatever.
I love noodles.